Hello, everyone. This is the Catholic CEO, Henry Katarna. Today, I'm joined by my great friend, Tony Warren. And Tony, I'd like to welcome you to this episode of the Catholic CEO's Exemplary Catholic Leaders series. Welcome.
Well, it's nice to be here. And I will dispute, I don't think you know what the word exemplary means, if you're using me as an example.
I think that I have come to know you over many years. Tony and I have known each other for a long time, and we do interesting things together. And I'm going to introduce Tony, and we're going to talk about his faith journey and his background. But Tony, I've come to know him as an inventor. I'll call him an inventor. He has developed all sorts of interesting technologies over the years. I hope we can talk a little bit about that today. And so in our conversations, we talk about cool technology ideas. And Tony, when I was learning to ski a few years ago, Tony patiently watched me stumble around the hills and the mountains just west of Calgary. And I'm always grateful for that. And we have talked theology, we've talked faith, and we've done this kind of conversation for actually many years now. So it's really great to have you with us, Tony. So, how about we begin with, I think our audience might be interested in who you are and where you grew up and that sort of thing. What is your faith journey? How did this all happen, and where are we now with your faith journey? And soon we'll talk about your business and your technology work. But where did you begin in the faith, Tony, and how was that journey?
Well, I was born in Edmonton, and in 1959, my family moved to Sherwood Park, and I was born a Catholic. Typical, middle class upbringing in Sherwood Park, Alberta, which is a little suburb of Edmonton, east of Edmonton, of the city. When my family moved there, there was 400 and some people, and now I think it's something like 75,000 or more. It's for whatever reason it's growing, and so when we first got there, there was no church, and I was only 4 years old, so it took a while to get the church built and all of that. We don't have a great story like your grandfather did of everyone getting around and digging a big hole with a pie plate.
Yeah, quite a story, wasn't it?
It was a pretty amazing story.
Yeah.
And so I grade 1 and 2, I went to the pagan school, and in grade 3 we opened our own school, all PH school, and I attended there, and followed the sort of the path I think that most Catholic kids follow. Was an altar boy. Originally learned they learned the Latin Mass, and they pulled the rug out from under us, kind of right in the middle of all that. Yes. I went to what they called the new Mass then, which was basically the translation of the Latin Mass, which I thought was just fine. And then thence from there I went to the whatever the Novus Ordo Mass, basically what we've got today, which is an interesting change. At the time, my sister's boyfriend, now my brother-in-law, was the king of the altar boys. So as such, I got some of the nice paying gigs, the weddings and the funerals and that sort of thing. And there was another guy about we're both really short. We kind of looked alike, and so we would be the guys carrying the candle behind the guy with the cross, and it was nice symmetry and everything, and we thought that was great, and kept us from being out in the parking lot, boosting hubcaps or whatever else we would have been doing at the time. So that was good. I've long claimed that being a teenage boy and being a Catholic are almost completely irreconcilable. in that all the stuff that you got to do to be a good Catholic is all the stuff, all the stuff you want to avoid to be a good Catholic is all the stuff you want to do when you're that age. So, I managed to get through that and kind of towards the end of high school. I just stopped going to mass. I was ski racing and just didn't make the effort. Then I went to university and studied psychology and philosophy. And, at that time, existentialist philosophy and psychology were quite prominent. And so, it was fashionable to be either an atheist or agnostic. And I'm too non-committal to be an actual atheist. So I thought, well, what I'll do here is I'll just bobble on the fence and we'll see what happens. So, life went on. I had some interesting experiences. I was in an airplane crash with 4 other guys, and all of us should have died but didn't.
Yes.
But even that didn't sort of push me to where I'm going, well, man, something good happened here. Go back to the church, you dummy. It took me a little longer to figure that out. And I was actually a psychiatrist or a psychologist I was seeing that said, she was firing me as a patient. Mm-hmm. And she said, I think one thing you've got to look at is maybe your spiritual side. And
your counselor said that to you?
Yeah.
Yes.
And I go, and I happened to know she was a Catholic, but she wasn't practicing. But anyway, nonetheless, she was a pretty brilliant person. And then I kind of thought about it a bit. I had married a Mennonite woman who's brilliant and wonderful and fabulous, as you well know. Yes. And so we started attending, Protestant services, and because her family was quite, religious in the Mennonite faith, and so we'd go to these services, and I'd sort of sit in the back. And the thing that struck me the most was that I couldn't figure out who the pastor was. So to me, it was some guy who would stand up in the front of the church, and let me tell you, the Mennonites are really good singers. So
yes. So
I was enjoying that part. But
yes, there's a musical tradition, isn't there?
Yeah, that's a big part for them. So I'm sitting in church all the time. And then some guy would stand up and read some scripture, and then tell me, why I should believe whatever it is that's in what he thought was the scripture. And I did that in different churches and stuff. And then pretty soon I'm going, wait a minute, who is that guy? And I didn't know whether he was a pastor. I didn't know anything about him. He was just some guy up there talking. He may know a whole bunch of stuff, but at that point I sort of go, well, listen, dummy, you're actually a Catholic, and if you're going to do this, be a Catholic. So be a Catholic. And that started me back on my journey to being a Catholic. And I was attending the Novus Ordo Mass, and actually had a series of really good priests that I quite liked. But by sheer luck, I met our mutual friend, Father Sumich,
yes,
in a ski shop on Christmas Eve in Calgary, and being not the smartest guy that you've ever met, I was standing there talking to him, and we're flexing skis and stuff, and then I wander off in this little ski shop, and it didn't, I saw there was something odd about the guy, but I wasn't sure what it was until the owner of the ski shop said, "Oh, Father Sumich." And I go, "That's it. He's a priest." But he was a full tilt, no kidding, FSSP priest, and he had his cassock on. He had as you know, with Father Sumich, he always had some kind of cool hat on, and I go, "Wait, whoa!" So I go over and I talk to him, and I said, "So what's the deal with you?" And he goes, "Well, I just moved here in October, and I'm gonna ski." And I said, "Listen, I've got a pair of skis that my wife won't let me ski on because I made the mistake of telling her that when I crashed and broke my collarbone really badly, it wasn't me being an idiot; it was my skis were trying to kill me." And
blame the technology.
Oh, exactly. It was really good technology. So I said to Father, I said, look, are you a good skier? And he said, well, I've spent a lot of years in Austria, and I'm a level 2 instructor there and stuff like that. And I go, "I don't know." So I look at him all suspicious like, and I go, okay, well, let's go skiing. And if you can handle the skis, I'll give you this really great pair of head race room GS skis. And he said, okay. So we struck up a friend. We went skiing, and obviously he can handle the skis. So
he's a superb skier, no doubt.
Really good skier. And we had applications on our phone that would tell us how fast we're going. And so, any two men who are good skiers, everything's a race, right? So at the end of the day, we go, aha, I beat you. I was 75.67 miles an hour, and you were only 75.93, or something. And
the competitive nature.
Yeah. So anyway, but at that point, now I've got, well, I'll just back up a little bit. He invited us to the Latin High Mass at St. Anthony's, the Sun Mass, on Christmas Eve. And I brought, my wife and my sister-in-law were visiting us, and they came, and they were blown away by it. And I was really, amazed by it. And so I became a member of that parish, which is how I met you. And the beauty of, Father, the FSSP requires recreation on the part of the priests every week. And so Padre and I would go, Father Sumich and I would go skiing.
Actually known as the Padre to us.
Padre, yes. Yeah. Well, amongst a select group.
That's right. No, you have to be on the inner circle. There's no doubt about it. No.
Yeah, and we're in it. So.
Exactly. Yeah.
But so now I've got this captive, really like the guy's brilliant.
Yes.
And so all of the stupid questions I had about the Catholic Church, all the junk that was going on the chairlift ride up, I could torture him with. So I go, oh yeah, what about this? And then he would tell me how scandalous it was and why it was a bad stuff and all this. And so he answered every one of those questions beautifully, and that just started to really cement my faith back to where it should be. And so that through that I met you, and I met a few other people, but you were the leader of the pack there at St. Anthony's. If it was politics, you'd be the bag man, I think, is what they would call you.
Well, it's true. I spent probably 20 years plus as, in effect, the head of the parish council, but it was because it was a parish within a parish. The traditional Latin Mass in Calgary is the FSSP does not have its own church, and so it was you could say coexisting with a regular parish at St. Anthony's there. And so I had to develop 22 subcommittees to create basically almost a parallel structure to a parish council structure for the Latin Mass community. And we did a lot of fundraising and that sort of thing. So
as far as I'm concerned, fundraising was you'd sidle up to me and go, hey, Tone, I need some money. And I go, how much, Henry? And you go.
And you always, you've been very generous, and you would write the checks. And we did, this isn't a part of Catholic living, isn't it? Because we would raise funds for articles for the church. For example, if we would be getting ordained, we'd buy a chalice or a set of vestments. And the parish at that time needed a set of vestments. And I recall how we, in a short order, in about 2 or 3 weeks, we raised a huge amount of money to buy complete sets. Yeah, of
made by the vestment haberdasher for the Pope. Like they're serious.
Exactly.
They have a
famous Gemarelli. The Gemarelli people in Rome made those vestments, and they're, it's interesting about. Just a small thought that comes to mind. The vestments are designed to last 150 years. They're not created for, to be done in 10 or 15 years. And in fact, you'll remember Father Sumich said to us one time that he went to the cathedral in Calgary, and somebody said to him, okay, go down in the basement and take a look. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. And so Father went down and found requiem sets and beautiful sets of vestments that had been cast aside really, and were there, but they're in use now again.
Yeah.
And they will last. Some of those will last actually 200 years because they're crafted, they're made so well. So it's a little vignette in the faith journey, but that's of course the nature of Catholicism. It's long lasting, it's eternal, it's ancient, and so the articles that we use are like that. So that's I think what you're also telling me. I'm thinking about your relationship and our friendship with Father Sumich and other priests that are like him. They are, they're interesting people because they can relate to you as a person, and then they can speak in the theological language that is necessary. And I know you've had a bit of you're an intellectual thinker, you're an ontological kind of guy. And so tell us about that. What did that priest actually help you with the intellectual argument? It seems to me you said to us a minute ago that you were observing the preaching in a Mennonite church and you were observing probably the musical aspects of it, but was it the intellectual that finally got you to restore your Catholic faith, would you say?
Good question. Partly. Part of it was just the realization that if there's no liturgy, there's no point. At least to someone who's been brought up in the Catholic faith. Mm-hmm. And I've had Anglican friends say the same things to me. Mm-hmm. There's not all that much difference other than, they're all going to burn in hell on that, but whatever. Like we know.
You've always been candid, haven't you, Tony?
Well, obviously I'm kidding. I don't know.
Yeah.
But
no, you're not making a judgment call on somebody. I know that.
Sure am not.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But that was part of it. And the other part was, yes, the intellectual side, which Father Sumich and Father Cryer up here in Edmonton is amazing at. So Father Cryer was an FSSP priest of stunning intellect.
Yes.
And for whatever reason, he decided to move to Novus Ordo. And it's not something I bug him about, but he and I are still friends. And I attend, a portion of my time at his masses because he's an unbelievably good sermonizer and homily giver. And he did a great series a couple of years ago on basically, I called it Summa Theologica Light, where, apologetics for dumb guys like me, where, and that really spurred me into thinking more and more about how I came to think. And he introduced me to a really cool book on logic by D.Q. McInerney.
Yes.
Who was I don't know, an instructor, a prof, whatever at the seminary in Nebraska, taught for many years at Notre Dame, and so tip-top Catholic guy with I have this vision of him because there's no picture that I've seen of him or anything, but I think he's a guy with like the world's biggest head, and he's got like a 26-inch neck, and the head so big because it's so full of brains that it looks like he's a pencil neck.
It's quite an image you're portraying. But it's true, and I've heard Father Crier's sermons. Occasionally, he would come to Calgary to spell off priests and to fill in, and intellectual rigor, and that's an aspect of faith that appeals to a lot of people. Many people come for the could say the experience, the emotion of it, the music, the liturgy, the chant, all of those beautiful and wonderful parts of the patrimony of the church. But others, and many of us, I think, would seek the intellectual. We need to hear the arguments made and develop.
That's exactly right. And so it is a wonderful combination, and having those sorts of priests is it's nothing short of a miracle for us. I want to show you. I've got 2 projects for Lent.
Yes, let's talk about Lent. Here we are on Ash Wednesday today.
It's Ash Wednesday, and one of us can prove it. But
I've been to 7 a.m. Mass, and I know you're going this evening. And so we will have received, both of us, ashes today.
We'll be in good shape. That's right, from that perspective. But I have the Kindle version of St. Alphonsus Liguori's Preparation for Death, which I'm working through. And part of the reason I am is that you did it last year at Atlanta.
Yes, I did.
The year before.
Yes.
and you sort of said, it's, we're talking, and you sort of go, well, it's not as bad as you think. You're going, okay, sure.
Well, and the great thing about his preparation for death, and I know you're going to tell us about it in a second, but it works out that there's one section with a meditation and a reflection and an exhortation for each day of Lent. And so it works out perfectly. By the time the Triduum arrives, you have completed it. So what are you're working? I guess today is day 1 of this study.
Yes. And I'm doing another one by our pal DQ McInerney, because when I got the little book, I went online to the FSSP shop and bought everything I could of his. So I've got about a foot and a half of book, and I hope you can see this. So basically, it's all shiny and everything. That's worthless. Yeah, there you are.
An introduction to foundational logic.
Right. Okay. So it's, not that thick.
But it's a formidable looking tome, that's for sure.
Well, it's a text that I think he used to teach the guys at the seminary.
Yes.
How to use logic well, and I've just barely started it, and in fact I'm going to start it again, because as I'm reading it, I'm going, man, I should be taking notes. And so suddenly I go, I need a notebook. And so I'm going to start again from scratch so I can make notes that I'll never look at again, probably. But, so, and, Lent is, I honestly, I'm not sure. I don't know that much about the Lenten tradition. From a rigor point of view. We make penitential sacrifices in preparation for the resurrection of our Lord.
Yes.
And we have to go, through part of the torture that, in part by meaning we're spectators, the most horrible thing that anyone can imagine doing. The movie by Mel Brooks. What the heck's the name of it, Henry?
The Passion of the Christ.
The Passion of the Christ.
Yeah.
I was gonna go, those darn Romans, but that was the subtitle.
Yeah, exactly.
But it portrays
a profound film.
Very, and it's a tradition for us to sit down and watch it on Good Friday or Holy Thursday, or I don't know, one of those days. And then of course, we do our fasting to the best we can. Both of us kind of get a slide because we're a bit geezers, but we both have dietary requirements that we have to sort of eat something. We're not going to survive 40 days in the desert. First of all, although we wouldn't mind being in the desert this time of the year in Edmonton anyway, but
yes, indeed.
We're not gonna, that's not going to happen. So
well, so you're preparing, you're doing Lent, you're doing something spiritual reading. St. Alphonsus Liguori, you're doing some McInerney, as we say, which is And I love the concept of logic. In fact, let's have a little word about logic, because this is and then we'll just finish on Lent. You're doing, of course, your penitential works as your station in life permit at this point. But this logic thing, Tony, that you and I have commented many times on the fallacies that people can spout, whether it's leaders or just the ordinary citizen. They can spout non sequiturs in a way that is acceptable to most people. And yet, if you follow the rules of logic, you can instantly see the fallacy. So what about that? Is that seems to be a cause of a lot of the trouble in our communication these days?
Well, it comes down to, the Ten Commandments. Mm-hmm. If let's say you follow those darn 10 commandments really well, which is the way that we sort of as Catholics think, well, if we break these and we get forgiveness, we go to confession, we start with a clean slate, although we know we're going to suffer in purgatory. So we get plenary indulgences and stuff, anything we can do to avoid as much of that as we can. Yeah. But it's logic itself. So when I think about things, I think in a couple different ways. So if you say to me, Tony, I'm going to build a car out of, I don't know, cheese. And then my first thing would be, is that true? So is what Henry's telling me, is it true? And then does it come from the objective world? In other words, and this is where this particular book, McInerney lays it out really quick, really easily, about how ideas, the things that live only in our minds, can only be apprehended in terms of how they reflect the objective world that we see. Yeah. So if we first ask the question, so a statement is made, and the first thing you go is it true? And if someone says, it's way better, and yeah, it might be true, and it might be way better, but then you have to say, compared to what? So, it's way better to have, I'm not good at pulling things off the top of my head, but if you just, all you have to do is go to, basically do not bear false witness. And if someone's telling you something and it's false, or you have good reason to believe it's false, and you interrogate them to tell you why they're making that truth claim, their argument will fall apart really quickly, because it's starting with a false premise. And so, basically, don't lie. Yeah. You want to find out what's right, don't lie. Start there. If you're being lied to, understand that you're being lied to.
Yeah. But the nature of marketing, the nature of political speech, the nature of public discourse, I'm not going to assert that everybody lies or that many people lie. And yet we know that there's a spin. So many, we live in a time, in an era when there's spin on everything. No one simply speaks the truth. And even when the truth is hard, let's say certain Catholic teachings, people call them hard sayings, and it's difficult to even cite those without reaction. So there's something that's happened in our society to cause us to want to spin everything. And is that pride and the ego talking? Is it false witness? Is it lying? It's a good question, I think. But
well, and in fact, Jeannie's reading, we're talking over Brecky, and she's reading a book about propaganda right now, written in the 50s. And if you imagine that this is a new situation, I think you're wrong.
Exactly. I
you know,
agree. Yeah.
this is as old as mankind.
Yeah.
And you can read it throughout history. It gets interwoven into myth.
Mhm.
We turn these lies into almost like myths, but the base of that, Henry, is another interesting problem: is how do we think? What are the processes we go through when we're thinking? So I think I don't know if you've had a chance to read it, but I had a guy by the name of Daniel Kahneman, who's an Israeli guy, brilliant psychologist,
Mhm.
received a Nobel Prize. But even the Nobel Prize Committee is smart enough to know that you don't have a Nobel Prize in psychology, because that would be really a bad idea. But
Mhm.
but they do have one in economics, so they give it to him in economics.
Yes.
And he's spent a lifetime figuring out how people think.
Mhm.
And to thinking is really hard work. And one of the interviews you had, I'm forgetting her name, woman in Calgary, dark hair, pleasant,
I interviewed a consulting friend of ours, Trudy Peltier.
Trudy Peltier, that's right.
Yes. Yes.
And she mentioned this book, Thinking Fast and Slow.
Yes.
And I would, in my arrogant way, I would go, sure, she got it. But anyway, she at least knows about it, and it's put some of it probably to practice. So we have this combination of things that it's really hard to think because it's really hard work, and we can't sustain it for very long. And then we have, on top of that, we have the inability to understand, to think logically. We're not taught how to think logically,
Yes.
And so, but we can look at the greatest logician of all time, and that's St. Thomas Aquinas. People go, well, Aristotle. I go, yeah, well, okay, yeah, Aristotle, was taught putting words into the mouths of Plato and Socrates, or vice versa. But the idea had been around for quite a while prior to him, but he codified it.
Yeah.
And then our pals, the Arabs, not Arabs really, but the Muslims, preserved those books while they disappeared from the Western world. Well, pretty quick, St. Thomas has got his hands on them, and he reads them and he understands them, and he applies that methodology, thinking really hard and logic, to the existence of God. And
Yes.
so, I'm not much an apologetic because I don't think much about it. But if someone comes to me and goes, oh yeah, well, prove the existence of God, I say, well, tell you what, I'm happy to do that. But first, let's get a baseline here. So I want you to go out, learn Latin. And I mean, really learn it well. It's going to take you a while to do it. And then read Summa Theologica, which is just a summary of how do you teach Benedictine monks how to, I think you're Benedictines, how to prove God exists.
Yeah.
And so you read that, and then after you've read it and you comprehend it, come back to me and tell me why it's wrong. Tell me why God can't possibly exist.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's your statement.
Yeah.
So no one can do it.
It's an interesting, I've had discussions with people, some of my, Protestant or atheist friends. Yeah. I have, dabbled a little bit in discussing Aquinas's proofs for the existence of God. Yeah. And it's amazing how profound that is. And I remember as a child, as a kid, somebody told me, one of them, it was really the principle of first mover. To go all the way back, somebody had to start this all, and they couldn't have pre-existed. It can't pre-exist. It has to have been started by someone.
You can't have nothing and then yet.
Yeah. And so
It has
that's
to
one
always be
example
there.
of
Yeah.
of it. And you know, and I went to a Jesuit high school in
Yeah,
a
keep
classical.
torturing me about how great your high school
Yeah,
was.
exactly.
'Cause mine
My
was
my classical Jesuit education. But you know, they taught us logic. They taught the curriculum
Sure.
at that time. I'm old enough to say that I had, you know, most of my teachers in this Catholic boys' high school were 2 or 3 PhDs each. I
Yeah.
always remember our English teacher, you know, had a PhD in linguistics and another one in English and another one in, you know, comparative literature or something.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was fantastic. But the point is, logic, the Jesuit foundational at that time, as they were known as the educational shock troops of the church, they taught logic. And
Yeah.
you know, you can check any curriculum today, it's not even offered. And so people can flounder around making statements, ad hominem arguments, which is very common these days, as you know. It's
Well, I was
problematic.
going to mention how stupid you were, but I thought I better not. So.
Better not, yeah. Well, it's because everybody knows, Tony. That's why.
Well, I mean, it's self-evident in my case.
Yeah, it's self-evident. Yeah, this truth is self-evident. It's very interesting how the intellectual tradition that you're speaking about here
Yeah.
I'm not going to assert that it's lost, but it's hard to discover.
Well, and why we're, you know, and you and I have talked about this quite a bit, is we're where we are as a result of the confluence of a series of really, really, really stupidly bad ideas that are easy to believe. You know, we have well, okay, we'll start out with German philosophy. We'll just lightly cover German philosophy here, you know. And I don't want to go back too far. I'm going to go back, say, just to maybe Kant. There's a whole bunch of other impenetrable guys.
Yeah, yeah.
The basic, you know, the underlying idea behind German philosophy is that it's top down, and I think it's part of the German psyche that they like to be led around. So they want to have someone really authoritative who's really, they go, yeah, that guy's really smart. Tell them what to do, and then they do it. And so we start there. We end up in Marxism, you know. So we end up, you know, Hegel has the dialectic, and then suddenly Marx has a synthetic dialectic, which is just a really stupid version of the original dialectic, which is a stupid idea to start with. And we end up with a couple of, you know, we end up with Marxism, we end up with communism, and we end up with, it moves along in the 30s. You know, really smart Marxists looked at the Soviet Union and go, holy crap, this is bad. And so then they go, well, you know, that's not Marxism, or that's not communism, or wherever they felt like calling it. So they became the neo-Marxists, the Frankfurt School, and like a bunch of idiots. You know, the Nazi sympathizers in Germany, or sorry, Marxist sympathizers in America, dragged that whole school over to, I think, Cornell, and built them or Columbia, built them a really nice building, and they called themselves the neo-Marxists. And they evolved into, or their ideas morphed kind of into critical theory.
Yes.
And that was supported by another bunch of boneheads, the French, you know, French postmodernist philosophers who started to gain ascendancy like in the 70s. So you have the confluence of those two things. Well, you know, the big thing about postmodernism is it's a claim that the truth doesn't exist, that it's personal and it's fungible.
Yeah, relativism.
You know, cultural, well, and then they take it over. Then the, you know, Herbert Marcuse, like some of the most foul, disgusting humans you've ever imagined. And believe me, you don't want to read this stuff. You know, took it and created all this cultural Marxism, all this cultural relevance. You know, it's based on a pure fiction.
Yes.
And then, you know, we we had other thinkers like the Marxist, communist, Italian, Antonio Gramsci, who, again, just an awful human. I mean, God made us all, but I don't know what was going on in their minds. And, of course, free will is everything, right? But anyway,
yeah.
So he developed this theory that if you want to make big change, him and a few other guys, you want to make big change in a society, you indoctrinate it in students at an early age.
Yes. Yes.
So after the end of the Vietnam War peace movement, which was funded by the Soviet Union, and they actually spent double the amount funding the American and Western peace movements than they gave to the Viet Cong. $1 billion versus 500 million. What happened to all those guys? Well, they all go back. They're students, right? So what do? They go back to school. What do they go into? Journalism, law, and education.
Yeah, the indoctrination.
That's how you indoctrinate people. By taking away that foundational logic that's based on objective truth. Yeah. They've done that, and we're reaping the rewards now. Now we have a prime minister in Canada who, if he were to say something that was true, it would be inadvertent at best. And we're in the middle of it. And how do we fight it? Well, people start to go, I'm not accepting this. And the truth is, truth has got a lot of power.
Yes.
Pretty soon, and no matter what, everyone goes, well, wait a minute. I'm not eating food because there's no fertilizer. Why is there no fertilizer? Well, because we shut in natural gas, So it's just going to be, I think we're going to see the end of this sooner than we think, because
what do you mean
vast majority.
What do you mean
the end of this? Oh, sorry. Yeah. The end of this endless postmodernist propaganda,
yes,
rubbish that we're being fed. You're an economist, in your very center, intellectually, you're an economist, and about modern monetary theory. And I'm sure when you first encountered it, you're sort of going, what the, this is the dumbest thing. No one can believe this, right?
Yeah. The fiat currency. Well,
we can create any amount of debt and any amount of currency, and it has no effect on the economy. And you're going, we know what the effect on the economy is, and we're seeing it now. Yeah. And it's how you learned to be an economist was looking at the world through scarcity, that all resources were relatively scarce.
Yeah.
They look at it and say, we're in a world of plenty. We'll never run out of anything we want.
Yeah. This is it's the fallacy. Really, it's a fallacy, but it's also the classic test to me is always, what's the truth about this? What's objective reality? And when you have let's say you have a gold standard, you have a currency based on a gold standard. So there's a physical connection to a precious metal, and therefore there's a limit, and therefore scarcity is the construct that is based in reality. Now we have an endless. There's a belief that we have endless resources, not resources. We have endless ability to pile on debt and to spend without having a consequence to it. And the consequence, even now with supply chain troubles, which is only one thing, and it was actually caused by something else, is that the ordinary citizen who doesn't perhaps understand all of the nuances is going to be the victim. An elite will not be the victim of this, but the ordinary citizen will be. So it's a fascinating topic in general.
Yeah, well, and one thing I think we have to figure out is a new word for what the elite think they are, because clearly they're not elite at anything, and so we have to find it. There has to be a new word to really describe who they are, and even knucklehead's a little too broad.
One thing I've always appreciated about you is the your ability to with nomenclature. You'll come up with a title. I know you will.
Yeah, well, all the good weasels, no, it's been taken.
Yeah. But Tony, this what you're speaking about, there's no teaching of logic. There's an indoctrination system. Many parents, and I know, are of course trying to resist this culture. They're trying to homeschool, for example. Mm-hmm. And there are many great tools out there for homeschooling, and it's a good process. I've seen, it's just anecdotally speaking, I've seen the product of homeschooling, and they are, especially if they're combining it with later on in university days, a great books program, for example. It's one of my favorite topics, a great books program. Yeah. The homeschooling, which is the model I've been telling people recently, as little as I know about homeschooling, and I'm gradually becoming more knowledgeable about this. But homeschooling was the phenomenon, the pattern, until about 100 years ago, I think, maybe 150 years ago, except for the cathedral schools. When the Catholic Church invented the university system, that's a bit of an exception to it. But broadly based, homeschooling was the norm. You learned in a small setting at home.
Well, but there, and one of the real problems in that, in that particular model, has been that we're trying to compare our access to books now to what was available then. And a book was unimaginably expensive. So, when Dickens wrote, he wrote all of those novels were serials in
yes.
Little and that was, and there might be 1 in 20 people could actually read. And so that person would sit down with the newspaper and read it to a group of people. And that was how they learned about, what he was speaking to. So it would be rare for someone, say, certainly from the 16th century onward, to own in their lifetime anywhere in like 5 books they might own. And there was no libraries. There was no, organizing. There was no organizing principle for a library until relatively recently. So, when you look at historical figures like Leibniz, for instance, well, when his father died, he had a 5,000 book classic library, mostly in Greek and Latin, and some German, some French. So his mother's advisors told them not to let him into the library. And so at 5, he's getting into the library, and he taught himself how to read Latin, Greek, German. He was a polylinguist before he died. But it's hard to imagine how brilliant a mind that had to be. So, it's a two-edged sword. Going to, I would, unless someone's going into a real serious, real STEM field, I would really advise against them going to a university. There's no philosophy department, there's no literature, there's no, any of the humanities have been so horribly corrupted. And in those, I'll include, the field I studied, psychology. I'm not sure about philosophy. I think it's not too bad, but you still have a heck of a lot of postmodernism to wade through.
Yes.
And then, sociology and everything is so corrupted now by the inability of people to understand, people at that level to understand that lying is not a good idea. So, the peer review process is just absolutely busted. It's worthless.
The other day I was listening to a podcast, a Catholic podcast, where someone was relating how somebody who's, let's say, an instructor, a professor at a university, big secular university.
Yeah.
And they vividly showed their audience, this podcaster, they showed the audience that this professor is, articulate, right?
Yeah.
Articulate and well-educated. He's got a bunch of 18-year-olds in the room. Just think about it. And this podcaster said, think of your own children. If you have an 18-year-old sitting in a room listening to this articulate guy who deconstructs your arguments every day, all day long, you're vulnerable. You have no defense. And, I go back to my own schooling where I think I was on the cusp of the latter years of the classical Jesuit education tradition. There was some kind of foundation there. We were able to hold our own in debates with people out in society as we grew up and sort of went out on our own. But I fear for an audience today that in the universities, it's pure indoctrination, I think, and it's difficult to imagine how somebody of the product of, let's say, the publicly funded education system, even the Catholic system, they will have no defenses. They will be easily picked off.
Well, and
so what do we do about it?
A couple things, but when I went to university, I discovered I was illiterate. I had good marks going into university, and I have the attention span of a squirrel. Didn't know that, and learning disorder. I think it's called dyscalculia, that I didn't know about. You still can't add any. If I got 4 numbers in a row, it doesn't matter how many digits I can't add them together. But anyway, my English prof, and so I did well in English. I'd read a ton before then. But when I wrote my first little essay in my full year English course, and the prof wouldn't give me a mark. He comes to me, I go, well, why no mark? And he goes, because you're illiterate. There's no way on earth you're going to pass this course. And I said, well, let's talk about that, because I am going to pass this course and you're going to help me. Now, this guy was a full prof. He was, a world-renowned expert in the poetry of Bunyan. And he did indeed help me. And I did indeed pass the course, and I did indeed barely pass the course, but that was, and that's 50 years ago, more or less.
Well,
so
Tony,
I was an armed then.
Yeah. And so the question before us, I think, is, somebody listening to this, watching us speak, what does the Catholic family do today? Let's say they're homeschooling, or let's say they're not. Let's say they're still sending their children to the Catholic school system or the public school system. What do you do as a parent? What would you counsel Catholic parents? What do you do about forming your children?
Well, obviously you do the Catholic.
Yes.
So if the homeschooling, in my opinion, there's value to it, but as you've said, you've seen people who have really succeeded doing it, and they do well in further on. I've seen people who were very indifferent to schooling their children, and their children ended up fairly ignorant as a result. So it depends on the parent's toolkit. So if we had 2 kids, my wife and I would have all the tools we would need to teach them to at least think. And let me rephrase that. My wife has all the tools it would take to teach them how to think.
Jeannie is to be greatly respected, I can assure you.
Yeah, believe me.
Having known you both.
And the way to solve the problem is to be involved on the politics side, and use our power as Catholics, as a big group, to affect political change, where we start to actually do the teaching of critical thinking. I don't know how many people I've talked to over the years where they're teachers or they're professors, and they're going, well, we teach critical thinking, and I go, no, you don't. first of all, because I like to argue, but second of all, I know they don't, because what they're teaching is critical theory, and they're trying to say that's critical thinking.
Yes, this is a good point. The distinction to be made. We must know the difference.
Yeah, well, critical thinking is just good thinking. The foundational logic, understanding what words are, what they mean, and how they became to be what they are is important. Learning how to read critically, not to pull it apart, but to understand the thoughts that the author is trying to make. Like the author is let me give you a hint about who the authority on the book is. It's the author that is the authority of what he's trying or she's trying to say.
This is good, Tony. Thank you.
Not some goof who's reading it and going, well, the author is wrong. Well, the author might well be wrong, but you just claiming they're wrong isn't quite the same as proving it. And so it's a difficult task. I think we have to change the school system, and we have to change it. There's a couple different ways of doing it. One I prefer is having an open hunting season, maybe on teachers. But the other one is you have to
strike that from the record today.
Take that off. And I don't know any teachers, and no, I don't want any ill will towards teachers, other than they should learn how to teach. They should learn how to think. They should be taught how to think. They're such easy targets for indoctrination themselves, because at any given university, them and the journalists are always the dumb guys, right? Like they're sort of, they got the middle level IQ. Average IQ in the university used to be, I don't know what it is now, but about 115. Teachers were generally around normal 100, 101, 102. The physics guy in the undergrad, physics guys and philosophy were the smart guys at 130. And and that is, they're smart. But the way to fix teaching is to fix teachers' unions. They just can't have that kind of power over the curriculum, and because that it's just pure indoctrination. So we have to get politically involved. We have to get, when you have a Catholic school board, you want to have a Catholic school board filled with guys like like giant-brained guys who know how to do stuff, and will stand up and say, when they get the curriculum piece, they go, we're not teaching this to anyone because it's stupid. And I love the word stupid because it's a word that I put meaning to. It's an action. It's a thing you do. It's not your capability mentally. There's as many stupid people with giant IQs as there is stupid people with no IQ or low IQs. It's not related to intelligence at all. So to me, that's the only way we can do it. We can't fight it at home. And if we fight it at home, we're going to have a handful of really smart Catholic kids, but the rest of us are going to be doomed by everyone else. We have to change it. We have to change the politics of the situation. That means being involved at and those are great positions to start to fill. That's where you have impact. You don't have impact as an MP. You're just whipped all the time, or an MLA. The party says this, and you go, okay, we'll discuss it in caucus. Yeah, you're not going to get shouted down in caucus for,
This is,
although there is an advantage to, for you, for instance, it'd be great for you to be in some caucus because you'd be the smart guy in the room. And, for me, if I'm the smart guy in the room, you got to wonder, who's got the matches, because something bad's going to happen.
I did a stint in government, as you know. I was a deputy minister of economic development and also a deputy minister of social services, but I left deliberately because I was, well, there's a lot of reasons I left. Let us leave it at that. I'm going to take a look. There's so many things we could talk about. We're going to draw to a conclusion here in a few minutes because we've already spent.
We're boring everyone but us, so
we're really on a roll here. But Tony, the Catholic CEO we are
Yeah.
fostering the Catholic economy concept.
Yes.
And our whole thesis, you know this, is that we're trying to suggest that Catholics can run businesses and hire each other, buy from each other, sell to each other and to the wider economy, invest in each other's businesses, and we can create an economic powerhouse, which can then influence the culture. We can resist the culture, we can change the culture, we can change laws, we can change marketing behaviors, we can change legislation. You're arguing the same thing, particularly on the education system, to teach critical thinking, which is not critical theory, but to teach logic and to understand how to think is foundational, but we still have to change the political system. We have to get involved in the school system if we're going to adopt the public purse funded schools. And I think that's what you're saying. And so there's a harmony between these things. And this is why I think we enjoy these discussions, because we can make the change happen, but we have to get involved. So the family, so one more little sentence, and I'll ask you for your comment on this. The family is the fundamental unit of society in the Catholic economy, or the Catholic worldview.
Yeah.
But we have to also then live in the world. And so when we are in the world and not of it, we then have to become part of the political system, the economic system, the banking system, the finance system. Otherwise, we'll just end up building parallel structures, and that's not going to change the culture.
Right. Agreed. And one of the big, we see Catholics in positions of power. So Joe Biden, for instance, President Biden is a Catholic. Nancy Pelosi is a Catholic. And the question that we have, and it's not, be clear, not for us to judge, but are they following any Catholic precept when they're doing their jobs? And so they want to get the Catholic vote, and at the same time have the ability to do anything and say anything and lie like crazy, as if they weren't Catholics. And so there's no particular magic in just electing Catholics. We have to elect Catholics that are, I hesitate to use the word good Catholics or bad Catholic, because I think all Catholics have the potential to be good Catholics. But Catholics who at the very least will take a position and say, I will not lie to you. I will not shade the truth. I don't care if I get unelected. I'm not here for the power. I'm here to help. As part of my church, I'm doing what's important for my faith or for my country or whatever, as a Catholic. And you don't get to be prime minister in a day normally. I mean, if your last name isn't Trudeau, it's a little harder to get to be prime minister. So my position is that we start at the lower end of political thought, and then we move up, but keep that main principle in place. Liar, liar, pants on fire.
I was just, it's funny you mentioned that. I was just teaching my grandsons the other day about liar, liar, pants on fire. They hadn't heard that before. And so it's, the grandfather can bring such things to the table.
Yeah.
So,
Grandpa can tell them anything.
Tony, we're going to draw to a close here, because we've spent the hour in conversation, and we'll have to come back and do this again, because we haven't talked about your creative science and your creative technological advances, and that's a whole other topic, as well as your time in business, where you saw and didn't see Catholic principles at work or not at work. So we'll have to do that sometime. What would you say, last word to you, take us out with a little wrap-up statement of summarizing what should the Catholic family do? You were just about to do that, I think. And so what's the summary of what the Catholic family should do to make it good for their children?
Teach your children how to be good Catholics. Teach them to understand as much as you can how the faith works, and forgive each other, love each other, love God, and remember that God gave us, Jesus gave us the ability to be forgiven endlessly. And so when your kid's a pinhead, and after you taught them not to be a pinhead for some particular reason, and they'll give you an endless supply, not that I know, but be very ready to forgive and forget. And that's the number one task of a good Catholic. When you get interfaced with the secular world, or when you're interfacing with the world outside your faith, be truthful, be able to think, learn how to think, teach how to, learn how to think, read books, but also, don't be too judgmental, because it's easy for us to judge others and to be unforgiving in that judgment. And we, in a world now where we have social, whatever they are, so many different social sites, which, by the way, I've removed myself from 100% of them other than YouTube so that I can watch you. We have to always remember to be forgiving, loving, and merciful towards others. That the last thing, we just shouldn't hate anyone because they think something differently than we do. We should point out that they're wrong and tell them why. And but it's way beyond us to be judging the actions of other people. And we've got that guy. That guy, he's got all that judgment stuff really well covered. And the fun part is, you get to wait until you're dead to find out really. That's
right. We'll know at the end of time what is the judgment. Well, Tony, thank you so much. This is very interesting, very profound. Lots of coverage here of different topics, and like we said, we'll do it again. So thanks very much.
I would appreciate that. Tony, or Henry and Tony shooting the breeze is the most valuable thing there is.
It's always a pleasure. It's always a great pleasure. So thanks very much, Tony. Well, everyone, thanks for being with us today. It's the Catholic CEO, Henry Katarna. My guest was Tony Warren today. I know we'll have him back. Thanks for watching, and check us out on www.thecatholicceo.com. And God bless you and your families and your business.